Hello, hello. It's Let's Talk Tuesday, so let's talk about suicide. And I know I rushed through that because can you tell that I'm uncomfortable? So yeah, we're going to talk a little bit about suicide and ableism, uh, and body autonomy, and if that stuff is stuff that you don't want to hear about today, I'm sorry. Feel free to click away. I'm not comfortable talking about this either, but I said that I would a while ago, so it's time. Yeah, this is a video that I'm actually pretty nervous to make because I feel like I may not be able to express myself effectively as I usually do. And I also feel the weightlessness of my opinion and my beliefs being able to change, meaning I'm not absolutely affirmed in what I'm thinking or saying. Hence I want forgiveness for if I change my mind. But I wanted to start the conversation because it's not something I see a lot outside of the disability community, which is how ableism kind of intersects with assisted suicide and stuff like that. So just hear me out, please. This is a conversation. I'm not preaching anything. This is just opinions. So, let's begin. We moved around a little bit. Don't worry. That happens. So I mentioned in my video, Me Before Ableism, that the topic of body autonomy on suicide was for another time, and here's where we're going to talk about it, finally. I have two seemingly opposing opinions and just very complex feelings about suicide, and therefore would love to talk about it and flesh it out as long as input is respectful. First, I think bodily autonomy is so important. And in situations where one is actively being taken by a painful disease, I think it's someone's choice to decide how they go out. I think it's cool when they decide on a peaceful plan for their exit. I think everyone should have the right to pull the plug when they desire. After all, it is their body. But then my feelings get really conflicted when I realize how much ableism plays a role in suicide. Not necessarily from the person who is suicidal, though of course that's very possible, if not likely, but from their surroundings, from society, from the system. I have kind of an interesting perspective here, having had depression as an able-bodied person and having depression as a disabled person. When I was younger and suicidal, I had people try and stop me, talk me down, directed me towards suicide prevention programs, and it kind of hurts to know that now that I have a chronic illness and I'm disabled, that if I were to confess that I were suicidal to someone, it is very likely that the person would respond with, "Oh, well, that's totally understandable." And then likely direct me towards the tools that I need to do so, when they wouldn't necessarily do that for a non-disabled person. I've said something similar to that before, and someone responded to me with, "But of course, there's no other good reason to want to kill yourself besides being disabled." So that really red flagged it for me. And in fact, they didn't even use the word disabled, they used the word invalid. Like, but of course, there's no other good reason to want to kill yourself besides being an invalid. Which I said disabled because they were using it to mean that. And it blows my mind how people can be so bluntly and loudly ableist. And it's an acceptable thing to say. Like, repeatedly, people have told me, in efforts to compliment me, that if they were me, they would have killed themselves a long time ago. Statements like that just imply that having a disability is something to kill yourself over for. Anyway. The whole concept behind someone being an invalid, that they hold society back on their, or their loved ones back because of their illness or disability, is so ableist and so hurtful. And people who are suicidal because of their depression, mixed with internalized ableism, should not be representative of all people with disabilities. As a person with mental illness, with depression, and occasional suicidal thoughts, I can tell you that I want to live. But sometimes mental illness makes me suicidal. And I, being of sound mind in this very moment, would be appreciative of preventative measures. If there was ever very real concern. And certainly not all people agree with that. There are definitely some people that want their autonomy at all costs. And if they wish to commit suicide, to be left alone. So it's going to be different for everybody. And all of that is so difficult to navigate, both socially and currently in my thought process. It's hard to establish the lines between what is right and what is wrong. And I'm not sure if we're ever going to come to any agreement on that or real clarity on that, because death is so tied with beliefs and religion. So we're just never gonna agree on that. It is so difficult to talk about how ableism is weaved into this conversation without sounding like one is against bodily autonomy. I know that when I made the video Me Before Ableism about the movie Me Before You and about being suicidal because of disability, it was a different conversation than some people heard. Like, I was specifically talking about representation, and there were comments like, but I think, like in argument with me, but I think that if someone wants to commit suicide, they should have the right to. And I was like, I never said that I disagreed with that. In fact, I said the sentence in the video, the subject of bodily autonomy and suicide is for another time. But I never said that I don't think people should have the right to suicide. It's difficult to have this conversation without sounding like I'm against bodily autonomy. It's just not the direction that I want to go in. It's not the direction I want to go in at all. It's just such a difficult thing to navigate. It's such a difficult thing to process. And honestly, it's weird because I almost feel like I shouldn't be having the conversation because I'm not the one. But at the same time, it's political because suicide is, it's in our laws. And it's probably in our laws because of religious reasons, truthfully. I don't know. I guess I just want there to be a conversation about our socialized ableism regarding disabled deaths, because it's drastically different from non-disabled deaths. One, society being totally chill about disabled people wanting to commit suicide merely because they are disabled, and living in an ableist society, maybe jobless, maybe unable to economically access the medical care they need, etc. But not very chill about non-disabled people wanting to commit suicide. Two, the idea that the murder of disabled people are mercy killings, or even harder for the person who murdered them, which is usually their parent, and they do far less time when a parent murders a disabled child. Weird, I know, but true. Look it up. 3, the erasure of disabled death, like the ableist massacre in Sagamihara, where about 60 people were attacked with knives, 19 of them dead, because they were disabled. And the attacker had the motive to rid the world of all disabled people. But it barely made the news. These things continue to let me and other disabled folks know how little the world thinks of us. Jesus, I don't even know how to explain how painful that is. I wish it were as simple as asking non-disabled people to put themselves in our shoes. That we are living, breathing people with thoughts and feelings just like them. Heck, they could become us at any moment. But people think we are less valuable because we are different. How can you even begin to imagine that if you haven't experienced it? How can you say something like, if I were disabled, I would kill myself, when you don't know what it feels like? When you barely know anything about our lives? You see barely any representations of us being happy and wanting to live? But that's the truth for a lot of us. Becoming disabled was and is an adjustment, but it's not the end. We are so lucky to live in a time where there is so much technology and tools to allow us the privilege of mobility, navigation, and communication, etc. But I'm rambling now. I know my thoughts are kind of scrambled here, but I hope that I was able to communicate how complex my feelings are about this. And more so, I just want people to analyze what is going on and how society thinks about disabled deaths. That's really the bottom line of it, I think. This was a lot. I'm sorry if it was hard to understand, but let me know what your thoughts are on this in the comments, and I will see you all eventually.